All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Vancouver Aquarium. For those of you here at the aquarium, just so that you know, we have an online audience participating with us today. The online audience is welcome to ask questions. Just send those in through the comment section on YouTube, and we will look at those, and if we're able to, we'll read those at the end for our questions and answers, and we'll be able to answer those questions. For those of you in the audience, welcome, and thank you for being here. You'll be able to ask questions too. My name is Jonathan Holtquist. I'm the manager of public programs at the Vancouver Aquarium. Good morning. The Vancouver Aquarium's mission is to conserve aquatic life. Tonight's, or I should say this morning's, this is our first morning program. This morning's program is about the perilous recovery of the Taiwanese white dolphin. It's a story about a unique species and how people are embracing the need to protect it and its habitat. I think that's a story that we could probably find some relevance here in Vancouver as well, and in other parts of the world if we're watching from someplace else. Our speaker today is Dr. Peter Ross. He is the director of the new Ocean Pollution Research Program here at the Vancouver Aquarium. He has 25 years of studying marine pollutants and their impacts on marine mammals. He's also the chair of a working group that's looking specifically at the recovery of the Taiwanese white dolphin. He's also the owner of 2 cats and frequently likes to post videos of those cats on YouTube. So if you'd like to check those out, you can. Okay, without further ado, Dr. Peter Ross.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm assuming the microphone is now working. Good morning, everyone. As Jonathan said, I've been working on the Taiwanese white dolphin in a sort of facilitation capacity for about 10 years now. And it's a remarkable story, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And I should point out before starting, though, that the Taiwanese white dolphin is also known as the goddess of the sea, Matsu fish, in Asian waters. So for centuries, Asian fishermen have referred to this dolphin as the goddess of the sea. And I think that speaks volumes about the respect that fishermen have had for this critter for a long time. But it also adds weight to the conservation imperative as we look ahead. The animal itself it can be found throughout Southeast Asia, but there are different populations. And the population in question here in Taiwan is completely isolated and only found in Taiwan. And it's very small, very elusive, quite rare, and surprisingly camouflaged. When one thinks of a white dolphin or a pink dolphin, one thinks about something that you'll be able to, visualize pretty easily in coastal waters. But as you can imagine, where you've got sometimes fairly dramatic weather in shallow waters on the west coast of Taiwan, you can imagine the white caps against which you would see these creatures, and you could see them blending quite easily into the waves. So they are found along the west coast of Taiwan. This is Taiwan. It's an island. It's smaller than Vancouver Island. It's about 35,000 square kilometers, and it's home to 25 million people. So imagine 25 million people plus on Vancouver Island, and one can start to appreciate that there are probably a few conservation issues that people might be worried about. You'll notice mainland China to the west or northwest of Taiwan. It's not too far across those waters, and you'll see the depth profiles in those waters. And of note here is a 30-meter depth isobar, and that's that shaded sort of area, that very, very thin band along the west coast of Taiwan. And that is really the home to these dolphins, as I'll show you in a little bit more detail. They're very much coastal animals. They were only discovered scientifically in 2002 by colleagues of mine, Dr. John Wang, Shichu Yang, and Samuel Hung. These 3 people documented them scientifically for the first time in Taiwan. And in fact, when they first reported the presence of this population, there were widespread denials from industry and from government at the time in Taiwan because there was a perception that there might be an impediment to development or fisheries or other activities in coastal waters should there be this animal in their waters, and should there be, of course, a legal need to protect and or recover a population. So I can safely say that over the last 12 years, several researchers, notably John Wang, have spent a lot of time in coastal Taiwan doing surveys, doing photo identification work, doing line transect surveys, doing all of the things that one needs to do to get to know the population, to get to know the individuals, and to appreciate how many there might be, what their feeding habits might be, what their distribution is, what their habitat needs are, in essence, are. These animals are long-lived. They live 30, 40, maybe more than 40 years. So one can appreciate that we need to consider protecting these animals over a span of decades to simply protect a single generation. Very slow reproduction, and in fact, quite similar to our killer whales here in British Columbia. The females are maturing at about 10 years of age, a little bit younger than our killer whales that are starting to reproduce around the age of 14. And like our killer whales, they're having calves every 3 or 4 years. So nursing will take place from what researchers in Taiwan can recognize would probably last 1 to 2 years, and they're reproducing every 3 or 4 years. That's not a lot of production. That's not a lot of young calves coming into the population. You see here a little gray one. That's a calf beside its mother. And you'll notice the distinct color differences between the two, which I'll speak to right now. The animals are born gray, solid gray, and as they age, they start to lose the gray pigmentation. And at sort of young to at a young age, that gray will start to turn into a mottled gray, and the natural skin color of white or pinkish white will emerge over time. So this female might be 8 or 10 years old. When they get older, they'll lose all of that gray, and they will be white. The pinkish hue that one sees in these white animals comes from blood vessels just circulating at the skin, and so they are sometimes called a pink dolphin. This is the habitat for the Taiwanese white dolphin. The west coast of Taiwan is incredibly industrialized, and you'll notice we have a single dolphin in the foreground there in the shallow waters. You'll notice this massive petrochemical facility, but you'll notice another thing. That petrochemical facility is built right in the middle of dolphin habitat. You'll notice the concrete tetrapods, the shoreline armoring that is providing the stability for the reclaimed land that has been created out of tidal flats. The petrochemical facility is built right inside of former dolphin habitat. And this is happening all along the shallow coastal waters of Taiwan, which were ripe with wetlands and estuaries and intertidal mudflats, and rich home for seabirds, migratory birds, and marine mammals and fish and a number of other creatures. There are only 74 individuals left in this population. So even fewer than our beloved southern resident killer whales, there are not very many animals. Probably fewer than 50 represent reproductive age adults, and those are the adults that we need to breed and produce young ones. But we also need those young ones to be born into an environment where they're safe, they have an abundance of prey, they have unpolluted food, they have noise-free waters, and they have some habitat to swim around in without fear of getting caught up in fishing nets. They've been listed under the laws of Taiwan, the wildlife conservation law. They've been afforded the highest level of protection, and more recently in 2008, the IUCN declared them to be critically endangered. So this is the highest level of protection that is afforded for marine mammals in Taiwan, and it's the highest level of concern for an endangered species under the terms of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. The backdrop to this entire story is the Baiji, and for those of you who don't know what the Baiji is, this is the Yangtze River dolphin. This is the first and thus far only cetacean to go extinct at the hands of man. The last one was spotted, I believe, just before 2007. The Yangtze River is ripe with pollution, dynamite fishing, habitat destruction, and all sorts of other activities that led to the demise of this animal. This was a riverine animal, a freshwater animal that was virtually blind because they fished and foraged and communicated and did all of their socializing in murky waters. That was their natural habitat. But they have disappeared. And that's what we're trying to prevent with the Taiwanese white dolphin. As Jonathan mentioned, I'm chair of an international working group that's dedicated to providing the highest level of scientific advice from around the world to the Taiwanese government and any other stakeholders in Taiwan that are interested, be they private sector, be they non-governmental organization, be they media. And we've been working for 10 years actually a little bit less than 10 years. The working group was formed officially in 2008. But had been working prior to that more informally to provide expert guidance and feedback on the biology and ecology of the Taiwanese white dolphin at the individual population and habitat levels. And it's a funny name, but the Eastern Taiwan Strait Sousa Technical Advisory Working Group is the name of the working group. Sousa is the genus for the Taiwanese white dolphin. Sousa chinensis is the genus and species name. And since its formation, the working group has convened multiple workshops, published several scientific papers, and provided direct and indirect advice to government agencies responsible for the conservation of wildlife in Taiwan. Here we have another photograph by John Wang with a dolphin in the foreground, a fishing vessel just to the left. You see its bow, and then again the intertidal mudflats leading into another industrial facility, which is built right in the thick of their habitat. So the threats to these dolphins are immediate and they're serious. Net fisheries, a number of concerns about fishing, whether it's overfishing, whether it's legal fishing, whether it's illegal fishing. There is a lot of fishing activity in the habitat of this dolphin. In fact, we calculated that over 6,200 fishing vessels are operating within the habitat of this population of 74 animals. That's 32 fishing vessels per kilometer of coastline. And the animals don't go out very far, so their chance of running into or being disturbed by one of those fishing vessels is pretty darned high. Trammel nets and gill nets are a big threat. That's something that happens regularly within coastal waters. And trawling happens, although it is illegal when it does happen within the 3 nautical miles from shore. Trawling has been banned for a number of years in that area, but there is no enforcement. Reduction of freshwater flow to estuaries. These animals are largely estuarine animals, and by that we can think of animals that are near shore, but they're also relying on the rich productivity afforded by the confluence of fresh water and salt water. So a lot of the big mudflats are pretty much estuarine areas that are very productive, and that's where the food is generated or concentrated, and that's what creates the habitat for these animals. They are fish-eating animals. Pollution of all kinds happens throughout the west coast of Taiwan. We can think of sewage, human effluent, sewage effluent, which is largely untreated. We can think of agricultural runoff from very intensive agriculture and aquaculture along the coast. We can think of anti-foulant pesticides and other agents that are used quite extensively to keep nets free of foulant. Noise and disturbance is a big issue. There are a lot of vessels in these waters. There are a lot of activities. There are military activities. There's sonar and radar and seismic happening on and in the water. And habitat destruction, I was speaking to with a couple of the previous slides. The habitat destruction can be very poignantly visualized here. This is the central western coast of Taiwan, and you've got two versions of a very similar image. On the right, you've got a Google-based satellite image, and then on the left, you have a cartoon that reflects the data coming through in that Google image. And you can see on the left, the dark squares, that is reclaimed land. Those are industrial facilities that have been built in water or in intertidal mudflats. So you can imagine those, some of those facilities being built in waters up to 10 or 20 meters deep, quite commonly. And so the animals that formerly had occupied that depth or shallower would then have to circumnavigate or swim around all of these large structures that not only create a physical impairment to their habitat, but take away from the habitat for the food for the dolphins, and often have effluent or large smokestacks that are emitting air and seaborne pollutants of all manner. So this is a major concern. But we had a major success very recently when we were in Taiwan just a few weeks ago, 3 days before our working group arrived to look at the impacts and threats associated with fishing. The government announced the designation of major wildlife habitat, that's akin to critical habitat for the species, and they were quite aware that we were coming to Taiwan, so they used the opportunity to subvert our potential message, but I was happy that they did this. There is no better way to subvert the activities of scientists than to come out with a forward-looking plan. And the government of Taiwan essentially took an effort that we had led in 2011 when we published an article proposing critical habitat or priority habitat, as we termed it, for the Taiwanese white dolphin. What we suggested was that the major wildlife habitat should be based on two things. Number one, the confirmed habitat of these dolphins. In other words, every single spot along the coast where these dolphins have been spotted in the last 12 years by scientists and other observers. And that's indicated on the left-hand graphic with the narrow dark bar. So that is essentially confirmed habitat and distribution for these dolphins. And you'll notice on either side of that, to the south for a little ways and to the north for a little ways, we've got what we term to be suitable habitat. And that's where we have not seen any of these dolphins, but it's consistent with the habitat needs of these dolphins. And we said if you're trying to protect a population as well as grow that population from a critically low number of 74, then we should put these two areas together. And effectively, the two together was what we proposed as critical habitat. Government of Taiwan has designated or proposed for designation the area on the right, and that area on the right spans 4 counties. This is a first for Taiwan that has never had such a large amount of area set aside for endangered wildlife. So that is a remarkable proposal and admission that this population warrants protection and management action at the highest level. This area that they have deemed to be worthy of protection comprises about 80% of what we term to be confirmed habitat. In other words, 20% of the area wherein animals had been spotted over the last 12 years is not covered by the proposed major wildlife habitat. And the proposed major wildlife habitat amounts to about 50% of the total priority habitat that we had suggested the government consider adopting. So I would call this a major step forward. We have since submitted a formal recommendation to the government of Taiwan that they revise the boundaries, and we give a number of specific points and rationale for expanding those boundaries beyond what they're proposing. But this designation does nothing for the threats of reduced water flow into the estuaries along the coast, about pollution, about the threat of fisheries, about the reclamation of tidal flats for industrial development, or noise and disturbance. So this is only a tool, a management tool, within which the government can implement measures, mitigation measures, solutions, such as the ones that would address those 5 conservation threats. But in and of itself, these boundaries do nothing for the population. So it's going to be very important that the government proceed to then work with the various stakeholders to ensure that those protection measures are enacted within these waters, but also outside the boundaries. Regardless of where the boundaries are for major wildlife habitat, if you aren't addressing the threat of water quality, prey quality, noise and disturbance, etc., you're going to potentially expose this population to what is termed by biologists an edge effect. In other words, there's a heightened risk just outside the critical habitat boundaries, because fishermen often know that they can't go inside the critical habitat. Therefore, they'll amass along the border of critical habitat, where it's very possible the fisheries productivity is actually increased because of the protection within the critical habitat. So it's going to be very important for the government of Taiwan and other parties to make sure that the 5 threats are addressed both within the proposed major wildlife habitat and outside to ensure the survival, let alone the recovery of these 74 individuals as a population. Fishing, as I mentioned, was the topic of the workshop that was held just a few weeks ago. There are several types of fishing carried out along the west coast of Taiwan. In the first graphic on the top, you'll see gill netting, and there are several forms of gill netting carried out, some of them very creative, some of them fairly standard. Another form of gill netting is trammel netting, where you've got multiple layers of monofilament net sort of loosely amassed together in a wall. And that's often a much bigger threat to these dolphins, because they'll go and they might try to pick fish out of a net, and because it's a loosely hanging net, they can quickly become entangled, whereas a single gill net might be perceived by the dolphins as more of a wall, and they'll either avoid it or they'll be able to with some ease to pick fish out of the nets. Trawling in the bottom left has been banned, but the working group is looking forward to some enforcement on this file, because this is not allowed to happen within the habitat of the dolphins. Line fishing and other more friendly or less risky practices is what the working group is recommending, because this is something that presents opportunities for artisanal and sustainable fishing with less impacts on the food web as a whole, but it also offers better quality fish that is often sold at a premium in markets, as I understand it, up to 3 or 4 times the value of the same species that might be caught in gill nets. So artisanal or line fishing offers some economic advantages, as well as obviously some ecosystem advantages in that you're being far more selective, but it is also much less of a risk to the dolphins themselves. To drive home the story about the risk to dolphins related to fisheries, have a look at these photographs. Remember, there are only 74 animals. 34% bear major scars associated with fishing interactions. You'll notice in the top 2 photographs, we have lines on animals themselves. There's a line in the photograph on the left wrapped around an individual, and on the top right, you've got 2 lines that are actually slicing through just beneath the dorsal fin of this animal. And he continued to swim along, and you'll notice that the lines are slowly slicing through the dorsal fin. We're going to come back to that picture in the next slide. In the lower 3 slides, you'll see major chunks and jags, and in fact, in the bottom right photo, we've got an entire section of the tail sliced off through interactions with nets. So these are very visible and poignant signs of injury and to a certain degree recovery. The fatalities associated with fisheries interactions, not very well understood, because a lot of times the deceased individuals simply do not wash ashore. There was an individual washed ashore a couple of years ago with marks from gill nets, so fatalities do happen. But the very fact that we see this level of injury associated with fisheries interactions is quite troubling, because it indicates there are life-threatening interactions happening with these animals, quite aside from the ongoing stress and trauma associated with these injuries. This is not a nice life for a dolphin to lead as they seek to raise their young or feed and reproduce. Here is Cupcake a year later, after the nets had completely sliced through, these 2 lines completely sliced through the base of the dorsal fin. Imagine what happened. In the left-hand shot, you've got 2 lines slicing. They're about 1/3 of the way through the base of the dorsal fin. And as they're dragged around by this animal, you can see some weed and crud growing in the top left photo on the line. And imagine the animal swimming through the waters, feeding, socializing, living its daily life, being dragged down and hampered by these lines. And then over time, the lines continue to slice through, and the front of the base of the dorsal fin starts growing back together and healing. And then eventually the lines simply reemerge at the hind end of the dorsal fin. And you'll see what's happened in this larger photo, the bottom right photo. There is no fishing line present, but you see a scar underneath the entire base of the dorsal fin. Quite a remarkable photograph or set of photographs, and quite a remarkable recovery from what was obviously quite an awful time for the animal. The second aspect related to fisheries interactions are the indirect ones. If one fishes extensively, one may be competing with these dolphins for their food supply, and these are photographs of emaciated animals that are showing signs, very, very clear signs that there's not enough food, there's not enough of their preferred prey around. And this is a sign that fisheries management really needs to embark in a concerted effort to get a hold of the fisheries practices in Western Taiwan, where there's very little oversight, there's virtually no management, there's no monitoring of catch, there's no scientific monitoring at sea, and the Coast Guard, who is responsible, that is empowered to do the policing or the enforcement, well, rarely does so. Excuse me. These are some pictures from a local market in Tainan along the west coast of Taiwan. And larval fish is a delicacy, and of course these things may become a delicacy because there's not enough of the larger counterparts of the same species. So there is a very large larval fishery along the west coast of Taiwan. But what are we doing? We're simply depleting the future productivity of that food web. And this is simply to illustrate how severe the overfishing is getting and how all ages and stages of all species are being fished out along the west coast of Taiwan. This is, for all intents and purposes, this very clearly demonstrates why these animals in the previous photograph are so emaciated. The workshop concluded a few weeks ago. We've had two workshops looking at the fisheries crisis in Taiwan. The first workshop, 2011, was published by Liz Slotin and team, and that was really to document the impacts and the evidence for impacts associated with fishing and fishing practices in Taiwan. That was published in 2013. The more recent workshop was geared at trying to identify solutions. If we have a problem, can science help to generate solutions or guidance that will benefit the dolphins and illustrate the path ahead for managers or stakeholders? And the four basic recommendations coming out of this panel were: number one, this is in the little red box here, to ban gill netting in dolphin habitat. Two, to compensate fishers willing to switch to alternative livelihoods, maybe retirement. Number three, to encourage alternative fishing gear that is dolphin friendly, like line fishing. Number four, to enforce the existing trawler ban in the dolphin habitat. And those are sort of very clear and succinct recommendations, but the workshop concluded that really if one is to protect dolphin habitat and encourage these recommendations to be adopted, the fishermen themselves are likely to benefit, as will the coastal economy, because the fisheries, the availability of different fish species will increase and the size will increase. And there have been a number of studies, notably in the Philippines, we drew on examples from the Philippines, showing that marine protected areas actually improved the economic well-being of fishing communities. So we tried to explore some of those examples because oftentimes fisheries managers and fishermen are reluctant to stop fishing even when they know that their fish are being depleted because they're worried about their livelihood. So we were able to demonstrate and illustrate from other examples in other parts of the world that protecting dolphin habitat would potentially benefit their household economies and the coastal communities as well. So I've painted a little bit of a story today, and it's really almost a tale of two cities here. On the one hand, we are under no illusions that these dolphins face a very tenuous future. It's really, in some ways, hard to imagine this population surviving into the future. In fact, we published an article providing an overview of the problematic related to all 5 conservation threats and concluded that there exists little doubt that the humpback dolphins will go extinct if existing protections are not enforced and significant new measures implemented. And for the last 12 years, there's been very little progress to protect the dolphins, if any at all. There have been a number of major projects that have been approved for development in industrial parks along the coast. Fishing goes on with very little oversight, et cetera, et cetera. So very little cause for optimism, except at this last workshop when the government of Taiwan made this courageous step to announce major wildlife habitat, as well as a second major development that was 2 years ago when the president of Taiwan rescinded the permit to develop a 4,000 hectare petrochemical facility right in the middle of dolphin habitat that would have extended out to over 30 meters depth. It would have split the dolphin's habitat into 2 and very likely would have directly led to the extinction of this animal. So that was rescinded. That was a courageous step. A lot of the local fishermen and others were quite happy about that not proceeding, although some industrialists would still like to see that go ahead. So 2 major developments in Taiwan that finally answer to some of the concerns being expressed by the international scientific community. And I think that does offer some hope for the recovery of this population. The expert working group that met just a few weeks ago suggested a management target of 100 individuals by the year 2030. There are 74 today. In order to get to the number 100 by the year 2030, that doesn't sound like a great big increase, but that's a very optimistic goal, but it's something that managers in Taiwan as well as stakeholders can use as a target. In other words, they can look at the 5 threats and try to figure out how to mitigate those threats in support of achieving that goal of 100 dolphins in Taiwan. So thank you for being here this morning, and thank you to the many partners in Taiwan and internationally that have provided much of the science that has gone into my presentation today. I'm really only a facilitator. There are a number of key scientists that are working in Taiwan as well as in other parts of Asia and the world to better understand the threats that we see to small cetaceans worldwide. And the problems that I've illustrated today are not unique to Taiwan. Small cetaceans are vulnerable around the world, including here in coastal British Columbia, to fishing, to noise, to pollution, et cetera, et cetera. And this is simply a case in point, an example of an animal in great distress, a wonderful animal, a terrific animal to see. They're quite hard to see, as I indicated, but we're looking forward to more science and more action to recover this population to 100. So thanks for being here.
Do you want to go ahead and do 3 questions? Mm-hmm. Let folks know if they need to go, they can.
Okay. So I'll take a few questions, and I'll take 3, and then if people want to start heading for the exits, that's fine, but we'll aim for 3, and if there are still some after that, I'd be happy to entertain them.
scientists in the universities fight for, and the public aren't really aware that there's such a dolphin in their waters, or very few probably. I was wondering if you knew.
Yep. So the question, which I'll repeat for the online folks, was does the public know about this dolphin in Taiwan? Do Taiwanese citizens know about this dolphin? The answer is they do today. But they certainly didn't 8 or 10 or 12 years ago. The species is attaining a little bit of a mythical status, in part owing to that historical, cultural goddess of the sea aspect and the fisherman's lore that has for centuries talked about this animal. It kind of lends itself to a very engaging conversation with the public. And the Taiwanese white dolphin is rapidly emerging as a canary in the coal mine or the canary in the coastal waters of Taiwan that is really indicative of the health of the ocean at large. So I think that helps. There's lots going on. There is the Matsu Fish Conservation Union in Taiwan. That's Matsu Fish being one of the names for the dolphin. They're doing a lot of work to advertise the plight of this animal and working with a lot of NGOs. There's a lot of awareness now, finally, at the highest level in Taiwan. You know, I think once one realizes that protecting this dolphin means that you're protecting the coastal ecosystem for future generations, not only of wildlife, but future generations of humans. And when one realizes that this dolphin is telling us something about not only environmental quality, but potential risks to human health, one realizes that this is not only a potent messenger, but it's an important scientific tool to monitor the health of the environment, to help protect human health and environmental health, and also to engage all manner of Taiwanese citizens in stewardship and best practices. Yep. Another question?
Peter, you
Lance?
said that the species was only identified or discovered recently, but it's clearly, you've also said it was known as a fisherman for centuries. So was it misidentified, misclassified scientifically for a long period, or how does that work?
So the species as a whole, as we currently understand it in taxonomic and genetic terms, it can be found in Hong Kong. There are, I think, about 1,400 individuals in Hong Kong in the Pearl River estuary. And there are probably 75 north of there along the mainland coast of China. And they're found in a few other pockets throughout Southeast Asia. The unique feature here with the Taiwanese white dolphin is that they have a different coloration, different pigmentation. As these animals are very strictly shallow water animals, they really don't cross the Taiwan Strait, which attains 70 meters plus depth. They've never been spotted outside of 30 meters depth. And their optimal depth, where they most frequently viewed, is about 7 meters. So this animal's reproductively isolated. The animals in other parts of Asia were observed scientifically a couple of hundred years ago. And in Taiwan and mainland China, the fishermen knew about them, but scientists had not documented them, or governments had not admitted that they existed. Another question.
One more question I forgot to ask. Are they identified individually through their dorsal fins as well?
So the question was, are they identified through the dorsal fins? There are a number of ways to identify the animals. Typically, John Wang and colleagues would take photographs from a certain side of the animal. So you always get the left or the right, and understanding that, of course, is important. There are a number of different features that help John and his team to identify the animals. But as you can well imagine, simply the scarring alone provides a very easy means of identifying a large number of animals. But the size of the animal, the shape of the dorsal fin, any nicks or cuts or scratches associated with normal social interactions, as well as the major scars associated with injuries because of human activities. They're all used as tools to identify these animals, and that's That's a useful scientific means of monitoring the population, understanding who's female, who's male, who's associating with who's having a calf, who the calf is born to, who's successful, what the productivity is. The photo ID catalog provides a very important tool to document these things, akin to the same photo identification catalog that's been developed and used here in British Columbia with the resident killer whales. A very powerful scientific tool that enables all manner of biological and ecological study. So I think I'll stop there unless there are any other questions, but I'll be around after the talk if anybody wants to come up to me with any other questions. So thanks again for coming out, and let's go get them, Taiwanese white dolphin lovers. Yep, you're welcome.
So for those of you that are interested, we have another talk next week